All right, welcome everybody to our webinar this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you're at. I'm Trevor. I'm going to be your presenter and your host today. We're talking eBay yet again, and we're talking about a topic that needs to be addressed and hasn't been addressed yet, very well at least in any of our previous material. So this is going to be good for you guys who are new sellers just getting onto eBay, and you guys who are a little more seasoned, a little more veteran, you've been doing this for a while. This is also going to be applicable. So this should be good for everybody. I want to show you guys a screenshot of something that I got or I've seen before, and it's an unfortunate thing. It's something I never ever want you guys to actually see sent to you. It's a notice from eBay. Here it is right here. Whoops. Let me expand that out. There we go. Hopefully that's somewhat clear. This is something that I've seen sent to a client of ours in the past. It's basically an email from eBay saying you can't sell on eBay anymore. Period. So this happened. Well, in all the years that I've done training on eBay, and I've worked with sellers and I've sold myself. This notice has come up maybe a couple of times. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it's pretty devastating. It's devastating for a lot of different reasons, mainly because they don't budge usually. If you lose your account for whatever reason and you're kicked off of eBay, you usually don't get your account again. They're not too forgiving. And so I want to talk to you guys about how to make sure you never get a notice like this from eBay. Essentially, if you read here, it says, we want to let you know that you haven't met the minimum requirements to sell on eBay, and your seller level is below standard in the U.S. and global programs. As such, you won't be able to list and sell items on eBay anymore. I won't read the other parts of it, but essentially, if you get an email like this, you're done. You can sometimes appeal to eBay and have them relook at your account to see if a mistake was made, but your chances look pretty bleak if this ever happens. Now, not to scare anybody. This doesn't happen often. It happened, I want to say, like 7 or 8 months ago to a seller that I had worked with for a long time, a lot of years actually. Great seller. I mean, he was doing really good volume too. He was doing 10, 15 grand a month in sales. And he was doing mostly the retail strategy. So he was buying and selling using retail products, having them drop shipped. And his account fell below their minimum standards. And even after this long history of really great selling, he had his account closed down, and eBay wouldn't reopen it up. So that does happen, and I want to kind of share with you guys what are some of the things you can look at on your account to ensure that doesn't happen to you, that you keep it in good standing, you monitor it on a regular basis, and then you guys will never see a notice like this ever, which is exactly what we don't want, right? So how do we prevent it? Let me share with you guys a couple of things that you may or may not have known. I don't think it's been discussed much in the webinars. Let me find the window I just had open here. I'm just going to look it up. It's called eBay Performance Standards. eBay has kind of an official page on it. And I'll share with you guys the address. You can just Google it like I just did there. eBay Seller Performance Standards is what you're looking for. I'll even send this link out to all of you guys. Let me see if I can send this out to everybody. Send. Look, guys, did you get that link? Did that just pop up on your screen? Got it? Yeah, everybody's saying they got it. For those of you guys who are watching this recorded later, just Google it. Google eBay Seller Performance Standards. I won't read out this long URL, but it's right here if you can see it. Um, so this is their seller performance standards section. Is when you sell on eBay, you kind of agree to abide by this, and you also agree that if you don't keep your account in good standing, that you can lose your account. So it just says that eBay expects sellers to consistently provide service that results in a high level of buyer satisfaction. This includes setting and meeting buyer expectations by providing excellent customer service from beginning to end. Now, the reason why eBay is so concerned about having good sellers on their network is because you guys ultimately are the ones that keep eBay in business. Because as you guys know, as you make sales, eBay makes money. And if you do a really good job with eBay's customers that are coming in and using their network, you're benefiting eBay in the long run. You're keeping customers coming back to eBay, and also the opposite is true. If you guys don't do a good job, you may not only lose the sale for yourself, but you may drive a customer away forever. So that's why eBay is so concerned about this. Truthfully, selling on eBay should be looked at as kind of a privilege. It's not. It's certainly not a right, and we want to make sure that we always have that right to sell. So they've got these standards. Now, there was an update that happened in the spring of this year, spring 2014, and eBay sort of raised the bar for themselves and for sellers to make it to where the standards are a little bit higher. I want to share with you guys what some of those standards are. A lot of it is kind of measured in what's called the transaction defect rate. Okay, this right here. I'm going to zoom in on this so you guys can see this better, because we're going to talk a lot about this defect rate. So each account, if you're a seller, you have a defect rate. You want that rate to remain as close to 0 as possible. Now, we're not necessarily talking about defects having to do with like your product having a defect or not functioning correctly. We're talking more about several things that they have listed that are included in the defect rate right here, how eBay defines it. So I want to read you these. We're going to talk about them, and then I'm going to show you guys how to monitor your account's progress as far as this is concerned. So it says the transaction defect rate is the percentage of your transactions that have one or more of the following defects. Okay? One or more of these counts as a defect. So the first one is detailed seller ratings of 1, 2, or 3. So for some of you guys who've sold on eBay for a little bit longer than others, what's a detailed seller rating? Can somebody tell me what that is? In short, the acronym for it is a DSR. Sometimes it's referred to your DSRs. Does anybody know what that is that's here? If not, I'll show you an example. I'll show you guys an example anyway. No, I'm not getting a lot of feedback, so I'm guessing not. Let me show this to you then. Let's just go to eBay. I'm going to look up a random seller. Let's do a search for something. Let's look for in the interest of January and it being health month, let's look for let's say like a weight bench. And let's click on a weight bench here that's listed at the top. And then when you're looking at a listing, you can come over here and see the seller information. I don't know how well you can see that, but I'm going to highlight it over here. This is the seller's information. And if I click on their feedback score, which is this number right here, 2355, it takes me into their feedback profile. These right here are your detailed seller ratings. And that just means, I don't know if you ever noticed this, but when you buy something on eBay and you're leaving feedback for the seller, not only do you leave them either a positive, neutral, or negative feedback, like you're seeing right here over on this left-hand side, but you also leave them a detailed seller rating where you give them from 0 or from 1 to 5 stars on how well the item was described, how the communication was, how the shipping time was, and how the shipping and handling charges were. Okay, so what eBay is saying is, and that happens every time, so if somebody leaves you guys feedback they're going to leave you not only a positive, neutral, or negative, but they're going to 1-star to 5-star you on all these different sections. Okay, these 4 detailed seller rating sections. Let me know if that doesn't make sense, guys. But that's what DSRs are. So what this transaction defect rate is, it's basically saying if somebody gets on there and rates you a 1, 2, or 3, which according to eBay is somewhat low, it means that maybe you didn't do such a good job with the person, that would count into your defect rate percentage. So that, anyway, that's pretty important. So we'll talk more about that in just a second. A detailed seller rating 1 for a shipping time, so that kind of corresponds with or coincides with that first one. Negative or neutral feedback. Now this is a little more new. If you get a negative feedback after a transaction or even just a neutral, that's going to hurt your, or that's going to I don't want to say improve your defect rate, but that's what it does. It makes your defect rate go up, and that's not a good thing. So we don't want negative or neutral feedback. If you get no feedback, and that does happen sometimes, guys, if you make a sale and somebody doesn't leave you any feedback at all, eBay assumes that the transaction went well. So you get that doesn't hurt your defect rate at all. Here's another one right here. A return initiated for a reason that indicates the item was not as described. So if you ship something out to a customer, or you have a supplier ship something out to a customer, and they get it and they look at it and they're like, that's not really what I was looking for. That didn't look like the picture. I thought I was getting a different color. They can actually initiate something with you, claiming that you sent them something that wasn't as described. So that would hurt your defect rate there. The next one below is an eBay money back guarantee request or a PayPal purchase protection case open for an item not received or not as described. So in other words, if you ship something out or the supplier you have ships something out and it never arrives, that's going to go against your seller performance and increase your defect rate. And then last but not least, and this one will affect you guys, anybody who's doing any drop shipping. Let me zoom in just one more time so you guys can see this well. This is called seller initiated transaction cancellation, meaning we reached out and we tried to cancel a transaction with a buyer who'd already paid for it. Now let me ask you guys a question real quick. Why in the world would we actually reach out to a buyer and try to cancel a transaction? Under what kind of a circumstance would that actually take place? Vince, well, you guys are responding to that. Vince just asked the question, how is it different? How is getting no feedback different from getting neutral feedback? Neutral feedback is a choice somebody makes. So when somebody goes on and leaves you feedback on eBay, they can choose neutral because that's a choice. And in eBay's mind, if they went in and didn't choose positive and they chose neutral, to eBay that means that maybe the experience wasn't positive and it should have been. So they mark that against you. Whereas if somebody just doesn't get back onto eBay and doesn't leave you any feedback at all, just because maybe they don't typically leave feedback, or they don't get back onto eBay that often, they just don't remember to do it, eBay won't count that against you. That's just kind of their policy. I'm not 100% sure why they do it that way. Okay, everybody just bombarded me with an answer to my question I just asked a second ago. Why would a seller, initiate a transaction cancellation? Out of stock, right? That's what the vast majority of you said. Jeff brought up a good point too, just to put a different spin on it. He said costs of the product went up. Like, let's say you were listing a product and it sold, and then you went back to your supplier and boom, it was $150 more expensive or something. Maybe you don't want to eat that cost, right? Maybe you can't find it anywhere else that's cheaper, so you want to cancel it. So eBay doesn't, suffice it to say, eBay doesn't like when they have someone who buys something from them on their network and then the seller can't fulfill on what they listed. in the eyes of eBay, when you list something for sale, it's kind of binding. It's like, if you have it for sale, you should have it for sale. They also understand that, you know, problems happen and stock outages happen, but they don't like it. And so if you do run out of stock and you have to initiate one of these cancellations, just so you know, it hurts your account. It makes your defect rate go up. Okay? So those are the things to look for. Those are all the big negatives that we we really sort of want to avoid, because if you get in the habit of making some of these mistakes, or some of it might be bad customer service on your part, and some of it honestly might not even be your fault. It's not always your fault if something's in stock from your supplier and all of a sudden it's not in stock. That wasn't your fault, right? Or FedEx shipped it out for you and it arrived damaged, or they lost it. I mean, that's happened to me where I ship something out, I know I ship it out, and it gets lost in the mail. It's not my fault. That's my shipper's fault. But eBay has to put the onus on you, and they do. So these are the things to stay away from. Now, here's the percentage that you guys all want to look for. So keep this in your mind. Right here, to meet our minimum standard, you can only have up to 5% of transactions with one or more defects over the most recent evaluation period. So 5% is the number. eBay actually evaluates everybody's account on the 20th of each month. So they're going to look at all your work over the month, and then on the 20th, they're going to make sure that you're not falling below some of those percentages. And if you are, they're going to flag your account and possibly give you an opportunity to change. But if you show if you show a pattern of really negative marks, you're in trouble for sure. So here's what I've learned over time. Like, if you have a bad month, just kind of bad, you fall below that, or your defect rate is higher than that 5%, but not by a lot. You know, it was over 5%, but it's clear it was just kind of an odd month for you. You know, they're not going to shut down your account. But if you show a pattern of it month after month and don't fix it, and or you have a month that's just absolutely awful and your defect rate is just so high that eBay just can't even put up with it, they'll close your account down on the spot. Okay? So all of this we can evaluate inside your eBay account. And I'm going to show you an example on kind of my my account that I like to show my clients in the webinar, so you can see kind of what it looks like. I'll show you this here in just a second. Let me look at just a couple of your comments here. Catherine, you've got a couple. You said, what if a buyer initiated cancellation? That's different. If the buyer wants to cancel it for a reason that's not, it didn't show up or it wasn't as described, if they want to cancel it because they changed their mind or they just want to return it, that doesn't hurt your defect rate. That won't make it go up. And it is possible for a buyer to want to cancel. That does happen for those reasons. Buyers can ask to cancel a transaction or have a transaction returned, get a return on an item or whatever. That'll happen, but that won't hurt your account. Here's a question from B then. B, you just asked, does eBay read your response to why you had to cancel? They do. And if it ever gets down to it, B, they will look at all of those reasons why your defect rate went up, and if there's some that are legit or whatever, they may not hold that against you, but they do look at those reasons. But for them, out of stock it's not actually an okay reason for them, and they make the point. I read this from on the eBay forums just the other day. Somebody was on there complaining about this very issue, this defect rate, and they're like, look, I put it in the, I put it in the mail. It got shipped out. It got lost in the mail. It wasn't my fault. And so now my defect rate has gone up. And eBay's response is, well, you're still responsible to get it to your buyer. You're responsible to choose who's shipping it out. If you're using a shipping service that's not dependable, then you need to find somebody else to use. And typically, like for you guys who are doing this, most of the time you're using the post office, you're using FedEx, you're using UPS. Those guys are all pretty dependable. Like over the long term, I've definitely have some packages lost that I sent out using the post office, and it's made me mad. But that's the exception to the rule. So that's never really going to hurt you too badly. Rhonda's got a comment. She just said, I just had a buyer initiated a return because he found a cheaper item. Or let's see. I just had a buyer initiated a return because he found it cheaper and received, but I did not receive the item back yet. What do I do? Oh, so you're saying your buyer who bought the product from you and you shipped it out to them later found it cheaper somewhere else and wants to initiate a cancellation? Is that what you're saying, Rhonda? Because if that's what you're saying, it won't hurt your defect rate. Certainly not. And they can return it depending on what your return policy was. So it's not a very good reason to return something, but depending on your return policy, I suppose they could do that. But at least in the interest of what we're talking about right now, that would not hurt your defect rate. Another question, what if you cancel the listing before time is up and not as a result of an actual transaction cancellation? Good question, Catherine. So if you list something on eBay and before anybody actually buys it, you pull the listing down, that does not affect your defect rate. So that's okay to do. The defect rate is more about you actually had a transaction take place. Money was sent to you and then some sort of issue came up. These are all issues related to that transaction. Okay, now let me take you guys in so you can see how to evaluate your defect rate and how to just track to make sure you're doing things okay, because eBay tracks it very well for you. Let me go to, like I was saying, an account here. This is an older account of mine. And let me show you. I'm in the account summary right here. And I want to see my seller dashboard. So if you guys know where your seller dashboard is, it's usually under account. I'm going to click on account up here, and I'm going to look for my seller dashboard. A lot of times it's right here on the left, seller dashboard. This link on the left in that left menu, and it'll take you right here. Okay, so here's an example account. So under a seller dashboard, you're going to see right up at the very top the summary of where you're at. You're either at 3 spots. Okay, you're either below standard. Okay, that's this section right here, if you can see that. Below standard. Oh shoot, I didn't mean to click on that. Sorry, there we go. Above standard, or you're top rated. Now this account currently is above standard, which means that I have my defect rate is less than 5% over the course of a 12-month period. That's how they're tracking it. That means I'm above standard. Below standard would be 5% or more. So if I've got a 15% defect rate, I would be here in the below standard section, and I could be in trouble potentially. So we need to be either here, above standard, or top rated. Top rated is where, I guess I'm not going to go into top rated because we've got a webinar on that, but that's where you've taken their minimums and you've just done a lot better than that. Your defect rate isn't just lower than 5%, it's lower than like 2% or something. I think that's what top rated is. And you get some added benefits for that. But there's another webinar on that if you guys want to take a look at that. Our goal is just to be right here at above standard. Let me zoom in on this a little bit so you guys can see it better. Okay, and then it takes you through your current performance. It gives you metrics. It says one of your transactions had defects right here. So I can click on it, and it'll show me this little summary. This is your defect counter. So you can see right here, this is what they're tracking. just like we talked about in that list just a minute ago. It's all listed right here. Transactions you canceled, 0. It looks like the defect I had was request items not received. This must have been a situation where we shipped something out and the person didn't get it, and they reported back to eBay indicating they didn't get the item. Now, what's nice about a situation like that, guys, is some buyers, before they go to eBay and sort of tattle on you as a seller, because that's what happened here, rather than the buyer coming to me as a seller and saying, hey, Trevor, I didn't get the item in the mail. It's been 3 weeks now. What can you do? If I would have gotten that email from the buyer, I would have gladly taken a minute and solved it with them. And eBay may have never known that that was an issue. This is only known to eBay when the buyer goes and sort of tattletales on you and goes to eBay and opens up a case, and eBay is aware of it, and so you get a mark on your account. If something's done unfairly, though, and you can verify that the item was in fact received, or they left you feedback that was neutral, but it was unfair because they said something that was wrong, or whatever the case may be, you can sometimes have this stuff or this stuff revised with eBay customer service. So if you think something was unfair or not right, contact their customer service and get it amended. Because you really should be in here at least once a month just checking out your progress to make sure that your account stays in good standing. If you want details on this stuff, you can click on the links and get more details about it on the account, okay? You can even go to this nice little spot right here called View Trending Data. And if I click View Trending Data, this will actually show me per month what's been happening as far as defect rate is on my account. So I can look through here and I can see here's the one listed right here. This is in October. So that one defect that I got must have just happened in October of this year. You can see the other months. See all these zeros? That means things are being handled correctly. Interestingly enough, if you scroll down here, they have a tracking information section where eBay actually tracks how often you upload tracking information within your given handling time. It actually doesn't affect your defect rate, but it is something that eBay looks at, so they track that here. So anyway, I won't look at this in too much more detail other than to say this is your trending data section, and you can look through and just kind of see how you're doing from a defect rate. And if there's any issues, you can hopefully find what they are and resolve them. Also, right here, the next evaluation is going to be January 20th of this year. And based on my performance on this account, eBay is saying, well, based on what you're doing so far, your projected seller level is going to be above standard, so I'm going to be okay. If I'd been having some problems this month, I had some open cases, some negative feedback, some cancellations that I initiated for out of stocks, and it would have put me below standard. It would warn me and essentially say, hey, if you don't get your act together, you're going to be below standard. Okay, so it's kind of a warning system, and that's why you want to get in here and review it, once a month, twice a month, just to make sure that things are going well, so you don't get that surprise email that eBay's frustrated with what you're doing. And it should never really be a surprise. You guys should know how you're doing based on customer feedback and stuff, but you still want to come in here and check. Okay, before I get to your guys' other questions, I'll just answer the ones that I've got right now before we switch gears. Okay, so Jeff, you asked, if a buyer wants to cancel an order but you do not agree, does eBay view as negative? It depends. So what will happen if you guys can't really resolve it together, Jeff? If there's an issue, they want to cancel an order, and you don't agree, it can be escalated to what's called a case with eBay, where eBay comes in and sort of monitors the communication between you and the buyer, and they review the situation, and depending on what happened, and they look at both sides of the story, and they'll make a decision. You don't ever really want it to get to that point. It'd be nice if you could just work it out with the person, but that's pretty situational. Usually when it's a buyer wanting to cancel an item, if it doesn't have to do with the item never got there, and if it doesn't have to do with the item not being as described, usually it won't impact your defect rate. Let's see. Vince says I have 6 defects from canceling items. Yeah. And that's for you guys who are doing retail drop shipping. That's where you're going to struggle the most in this. I mean, if we take a look back really quickly at what the defect rate is looking at, this shouldn't be an issue too often. Getting low DSRs. If you just do a good job, you get the order right out. You're using images from retailers. That's usually not the issue. Getting low shipping times isn't really the issue. Negative or neutral feedback usually isn't the issue. I find for retail drop shippers and drop shipping in general, even if you're using a wholesaler, the issue is if you run out of stock on the item and you can't find it somewhere else, you're going to initiate a lot of those transactions, those cancellations, and those can hurt you. Yeah, they definitely can. But I mean, understand, this is we're looking at this over the long haul, and a lot of you guys, I think, in fact, I know I've got some clients, including you, Vince, that even over the holidays just had some trouble with your supplier. Things were out of stock a bunch. Walmart wasn't great over the holidays this year. They had a lot of out of stock issues, but it wasn't just Walmart. It was other retailers as well. And sometimes that's a little out of your control. But I've got some recommendations on things we can do to fix that and help our numbers, because inevitably, drop shipping, the only one disadvantage to it is the fact that you guys you'll have some out of stocks. Hopefully not many, but you'll definitely have some. All right, let's see. Let me look through some of your other questions real quick. Make sure I've got all the comments here. Going back to Rhonda, your initial question, you said, what if he doesn't return the item because I have the 14-day rule? Then you're probably okay. If it's outside of the 14 days, then eBay will back you. They'll always back you on your return policy for sure. Welcome, Bill. Bill just showed up. Better late than never, right? Remember, this will all be recorded, so you can see this later if you want, Bill. Larry says, can you say while supplies last? You can, but eBay won't back you on that. That, unfortunately, if you put something like, inventory is low, order today before supplies last, or, or whatever, some sort of verbiage like that, that won't protect you, unfortunately. Because again, eBay expects when you list something for sale that you have it available, and you do at the time. And eBay endorses drop shipping. Like, this is something that eBay likes and wants you to do. It's just they don't endorse drop shipping where we're overly inconsistent. All right, so this is pretty important stuff, right? Like, I don't want this to scare any of you guys. If you guys have some defects on your account right now, don't panic. Like, we're going to be okay. That's why we're talking about this. I want to show you an account where it got really bad, okay? I'm going to show you a couple of screenshots to kind of show you. I was showing you just barely an account that's in good standing. Let me show you one that's not. Let's see. Let me grab the screenshots for you guys. All right, let's do this one. All right. You guys can see, hopefully you guys can see that okay. I know it's a little small. This is from a retail seller. And you can see they do a fair amount in sales too. So, I mean, this wasn't well, you can see right here, 22, I don't know, well, it's hard for you to see, but take my word for it, where I'm sort of circling my mouse, it says 22 out of 145 transactions had a defect. And that gives their percentage at 15.17%, which is 3 times too high. And why was it so high? If you look down here, you can see exactly what was going on. Well, what was it, just based on what you guys see? Why was the defect rate as high as it was? Right? It's mostly the one at the bottom, canceled transactions, right? Probably out of stock issues. In fact, later I chatted with the seller about that, and that's exactly what happened. They had a supplier that just really wasn't doing well for them. A lot of out of stock issues, and so they initiated a lot of those cancellations. Let me show you the trending data that you can look at on your account. Here's the trending data. Actually, yeah. So this is August 2014 up to January, and you can see here the defect rate got really high in November, almost 30%. So you can see August it was almost 8%. September it was 15%, then back down to 8%, then 30%. Okay, that's what killed them, and then it stayed at 15%, and this was all due to a lot of holiday out of stock issues. So before that, they were doing fine. Let me show you the other shot of their trending data. Okay, this was earlier in the year, February to July. Look at their defect rate. Guess they didn't do any sales February, March, April. May, they had 13 transactions, no defects. 20 transactions in June. They had a few defects at 15%. But then in July, it dropped back down. So it ebbs and flows a little bit. What you guys don't want is you don't want to see recurring months of high numbers. Now, I think basically what happened, why they ended up getting the boot off of eBay, is if we go back to this trending data right here, you know, they're at 8%, 15%, 8%, and then 30%, and then 15%. At that stage, I think eBay just said it's too high. There's too many. You're obviously not fixing it. We're giving you the boot. Now, I don't love that eBay did that, honestly. Because a lot of it was out of stock issues. The issues were resolved with the buyers. They weren't leaving them negative feedback. But that's, again, that this defect rate is largely impacted by your initiating cancellations. So keep that in mind. Again, for you guys that are selling, don't let this scare you. Just let this alter some of your behaviors, and we'll talk about what we can do right now on how to maybe circumvent some of these issues. And Jeff just brought up a good point. He says, would it be better to find product somewhere else and take a small loss than cancel a transaction? Absolutely yes. And you probably, for those of you guys who have worked with me before, I've made that comment to you. In a situation where you're going to lose a couple of bucks on an item, is it worth the defect point to lose a couple of bucks? Or should you just save that couple of bucks, take a $2 loss and keep your account in good standing? That's what I would do every single time, especially for you guys that have newer accounts. You sell something and it goes out of stock, you better get out there and really, really look for it and scour the internet and try to find it. It's one thing if you find it somewhere else and you can't get it for such a price that you're going to be losing hundreds of dollars. I mean, that's a different situation. But if it's only a matter of a few bucks, yeah, get it somewhere else and have it shipped out for sure. Don't initiate that cancellation. So that's one thing you can do. The other big point I was going to make to you guys is I supplement a good retail drop shipping strategy with selling a little bit out of China. And so I'll import some cheap stuff, like really, really cheap stuff. We're talking, for any of you guys who've worked with me on this, you can bring in 50 bracelets or necklaces or rings out of China, bring them in for 50 cents a piece and sell them for $5 or $6 a piece, and people will buy them. And you may not make any money off of those transactions, but those can be successful transactions that offset any of your problems you're having with the retail strategy or with doing drop shipping in general. I mean, that's the true benefit of carrying your own inventory, guys, is you don't have these issues because you have full control over your inventory. The downside is you have to carry a little bit of inventory. So I'm not saying you guys even have to do that, but if you're starting to see some defect rate issues creeping up that are beyond your control, you either need to take a little loss on some of your sales and get the items elsewhere. Use China or use a local wholesaler to list some stuff that you can carry a little bit of inventory on, or you need to find a more dependable supplier. Those are really your options. And eBay will give you guys time to fix this, but it needs to be fixed and it needs to be monitored. So, but guys, I got to tell you, just to tell you, I mean, honestly, over the, I don't know, well, I'm going to say last 2 or 3 years, as I've been consulting. I mean, I've done consulting for eBay for almost the last 10 years, but eBay's gotten, more strict with some of their policies. So as they've gotten more strict over the last 2 or 3 years, I would say this email I've seen come out to people I've worked with or people I've known about in our program maybe 2 or 3 times. I mean, we're talking way less than 1% of my clients or clients in the program have ever had to deal with this. But so I would expect nobody here will ever get the boot off of eBay. But to protect ourselves and to really just make sure we're okay, that's why we have this discussion. Because I want you guys to sell for a long, long time and make really good money at what we're doing. It was devastating. The one I had happen a few years ago for one of our clients, the one that I was telling you guys about earlier that was making, well, gross sales was doing, 10, 15 grand a month, which meant I think he was probably netting after fees and all his costs and stuff. He was probably netting, I don't know, 3 or 4 grand a month on average, which I know isn't like life-changing money, but this guy was doing this part-time. He was working another job. So like he was working a job doing his eBay business. So he was actually making pretty good money for the amount of time he was putting into it. And when he got booted off, it was devastating for all of us. And but he saw the writing on the wall. He had been monitoring this. He hadn't made some of the changes that we suggested today. And eBay finally let him go. So again, less than 1% of my clients will ever deal with this, so don't worry about it. Let's know how to fix these problems. Let's do a good job as a seller. Let's take a loss every once in a while just to save us from doing a cancellation, and we shouldn't have too many issues as we sell. So that's standard. That's eBay's standard performance. I hope that's been helpful for you guys today. I've got a bunch of questions coming in, so let me answer some of these and then we'll finish up. I think that's all we'll talk about. Let me see if there's anything I missed in my notes here. I don't think so. No, I covered everything I wanted to cover. So let me answer some of your questions and then we'll finish up. Vince says, if Google Shopping doesn't show the item, keep looking. I found an item somewhere else when it didn't show there. Okay, good point. So I know a lot of us, we talk about using Google Shopping. If you guys have ever used it, google.com/shopping to find a product quickly. But it's not fail-proof. Like that, Google finds a lot of what's out there, but not everything. So that's a good point. Thanks for bringing that up, Vince. Look elsewhere. Is this a cancellation after a sale, or does a cancellation before the sale not really matter? Yeah, and this question is from Bill. This is after the sale. So this is when a transaction takes place, when you've listed something and then somebody buys it. That's when eBay is concerned. If you listed an item and then later decided to cancel the item or just pull it off eBay, none of this would actually hurt you at all. Karen says, would you ever be able to get the buyer to initiate the cancellation when you're out of stock? Now, that's an interesting idea. I've never really thought about that. Possibly. Yeah, maybe, because if you had them initiate the cancellation, yeah, that could probably save you. That's actually a really good idea, Karen. Maybe that could help. I don't know how many buyers would do that. Maybe some of the ones that are a little less experienced, you could say, hey, here's how to cancel an item. You can send us a cancellation. Yeah, I mean, you might be able to do that. Sure, that's not a bad idea. Another thought. I did that with a toy out of stock at Target and bought it at Walmart and shipped it to Puerto Rico with a huge surcharge and made a loss. And that was probably absolutely worth it, Catherine, just to fill the order. 100%. Good for you for doing that. Rick says, if you notice that your item is not available or the price has increased, would it be better to take it off eBay at that time? Yeah, it definitely would be. And as you guys are starting this, some of you guys that are starting this process and you want to make sure your account stays clean, I would be monitoring your items a little bit more often now than I would otherwise, because your account's still brand new. We're trying to earn our stripes on eBay. Definitely monitor what you've got listed. And for a lot of you guys, that's like 100 items or less. So be monitoring that every couple of days, and just let's make sure we're in stock. B just asked, did he have an eBay store? This you must be referring to the guy that I was talking about that lost his account. Yes, he did. He had an eBay store. He was big enough. He had an intermediate store, one of the ones that's like, I think it's like $50 a month. Scott says, should you have more than one account, eBay account? Eventually you might, like for different businesses. So like initially when a lot of you guys start out on eBay, you just do it all under one account. As you get better at this and as you start doing websites, you might have a website for pet supplies, and you might have a website for outdoor gear. You might want to set up separate eBay accounts for each one of those. But that's not something you'd worry about until you've got several sites. And really the only reason you'd consider doing that is, in the end, if you guys end up selling one of your websites, which is a good exit strategy. Like, yeah, I mean, I know it's not something we really need to talk too much about now, but one thing you can do over the years as you build one of these websites up is you can turn around, you can sell it and make a pretty good profit on selling the entire web business, which would include your website and maybe your eBay account associated with the site, your Amazon account, whatever. So yeah, that would probably be the only time you set up separate accounts. At this stage, most of you guys will just stick with one. B asked, do you get dinged if you take it off? Meaning, I'm assuming you mean if you just pull an item off of eBay that you had listed, B, and the answer is no. You won't get dinged for that. Okay. Yeah, I think we've got, guys, good questions, by the way. I think I've seen everything here. Sorry if I've had so much good feedback come in. Sorry if I've missed anything you've said. I really appreciate your guys' participation in this, and maybe your takeaway should be to, if you haven't been monitoring your account, start monitoring your account. And for you guys who are just starting to sell, you probably don't even have anything on your seller dashboard. You have to actually make a sale before any of this is relevant. So start making some sales, and then you can start monitoring this. And you guys do this, and you'll be in the 99% of my clients that never, ever have an issue with this. And I suspect most of you will be.